It's always one of two claims that have you waking up one morning only to realize that the majority of your money is gone. It's vanished pretty much overnight because you believe some expert or some guru who told you that this was a sure thing. This time it's different, or it's impossible for it to lose value. And right now it's happening with Bitcoin, it's happening with gold, it's happening with stocks, and it's happening with the entire economy. The mere suggestion that one person or one thing or one concept is foolproof is absolutely ridiculous. But it's that kind of suggestion that's leading many people, many Americans, to put a significant amount of their net worth on the line in hopes that they are preventing themselves from losing their money, or in hopes that they will strike it rich. But what most people don't realize is the vast majority of them are taking a risk that they cannot afford to make. And in this video, we're going to unpack the truth about gold, the truth about Bitcoin, the truth about the American economy, and why this time probably isn't different. But before we get into it, my name is Nolan Matthias, and if you want the truth, the real truth about economics and finance, this is the place for you. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button so more people like you can see this video. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's discuss everything that's going on in the economy right now and the unfettered belief that whatever bet you are making is the right bet for you and the right bet for the economy. Because you saw some guy tell you that something was going to work, and as a result, you took all of your money, plowed it into one investment, and now you're just sitting and waiting for either the crash that you're protected from or for the thing that you invested in to continue to go up in value well beyond what it probably should. And I want to start by unpacking some of the ridiculous beliefs that are floating around in the US investment community right now, especially on platforms like this one on YouTube, where everyone, people like me, are now being given a voice, an ability to reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and talk about things that perhaps we know a lot about or perhaps we don't. I see it in the comments all the time. I get ridiculed for not knowing anything about the things I'm talking about, even though my understanding and my education with respect to economics exceeds the majority of the people who are writing the very comments that are criticizing me. And while I sit here and try to make sure that people don't do crazy things like invest all of their money in gold, people sit there and accuse me of working for JP Morgan or the Fed, or suggest that I don't understand counterparty risk. Well, at the same time, they fail to realize that things like gold actually have the possibility of going down in value, no matter what a guru tells you. Because here's the reality, the past leaves clues. In 2006, everyone believed that housing prices could only go up in value. They weren't making any more land, people needed a place to live, and therefore housing prices would never crash. Fast forward to 2009, when the entire bottom of the housing market had pretty much fallen out, causing a worldwide financial crisis. And you can see that it'll never happen, or this never happens, or this is a sure thing is never really a sure thing. And if there's one thing that should have been a sure thing, it should have been housing, but it wasn't. So I want to start by taking you through a few charts here, a few important charts. Let's start by taking a look at the yield curve. The yield curve is often the thing that indicates a recession is on the way. And when the yield curve turns negative, so in other words, short-term bonds become more expensive than long-term bonds, that is typically an indication that when that yield curve inverts and turns back to normal, that we're going to face a recession. Yet, even though the yield curve just uninverted, like you can see right here, many people are saying that this time's different and there isn't going to be a recession. And the likelihood of that happening is slim to none. Now, the question of how bad of a recession it's going to be is a different story, especially after all of the money printing that's been done and in exchange, all of the extra money that's been pulled out of the economy to make up for the excess money that was printed. So even though people are going, there's no sign of a recession, there really is a sign of a recession. And the only question is not if it will happen, but when. Is it now? Is it later? And how severe will it be? Then you've got the people who suggest that Trump is going to be very good for the economy. And with a Republican in office, the S&P 500 and investments will only go up in value because Republican presidents are good for the economy. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am an economist. I am fiscally conservative. I believe more in Republican economic policies than I believe in Democratic economic policies. But that doesn't mean that the period right after a Republican takes office is going to be one where investments go up in value. And if you take a look back in history, you can look at Hoover, you can look at Nixon, you can look at Bush, and you can look at Trump, and you can see similarities that are starting to unfold. and the unlikelihood that the S&P 500 is going to continue to hit highs and highs and highs, especially when you have a president who is dead set on putting tariffs into place, which, if Hoover was any indication, is going to be very bad for investments. Then you've got the previously mentioned people that suggest that gold can only go up in value. It's going to go to the moon. I mean, it just set record highs. Many of these people watched my video from 2020 about why you shouldn't invest in physical gold and silver. And while the whole concept and the whole conversation around physical gold and silver and the premiums you pay in order to own it and sell it physically is a different conversation, one thing is for sure. Many people overestimate how well gold has performed, especially in comparison to something like the S&P 500. In fact, when I made that video until today, the S&P 500 has significantly outperformed gold, meaning that if I hadn't sold my physical gold and silver, I would have actually lost money relative to the money that I ended up investing in the S&P 500. So even though people go, yeah, hey, gold's gone up in value and therefore you're crazy if you didn't own it, well, it turns out you're actually crazy if you didn't have money in both gold and something like the S&P 500. Because just because an investment performs well doesn't mean that there weren't other types of investments that outperformed it. And then on top of that, if we just go ahead and hide the S&P 500 here for a second, there's this notion that gold is a safe investment. It only goes up in value. Well, the truth is that's not true, because gold, just like the S&P 500 and just like any other investment, has periods where it goes up in value and it has periods where it comes down in value. And in many cases, it comes down in value quite rapidly. Just take a look at this period in 1979. This period in 2011, this period in 2020, when I was suggesting that people shouldn't put all their money into gold, and in all likelihood, the period that is about to approach in the next couple of years as the fear of a market collapse starts to go away. Then you have things like this, people screaming about the US debt and the debt to GDP ratio, and the fact that it's never been higher and it's going to be impossible to dig ourselves out of this hole. Well, here's another reality that people don't realize. The US debt to GDP has in fact in the past been at levels similar to where it is right now. And while the task of reducing the debt to GDP ratio is not going to be one that is easy, it's also not impossible for this problem to be fixed, especially in an era where the potential for increased productivity thanks to AI is more likely than not. And then there's the whole conversation about home prices and how they've become completely unaffordable, hitting a level that has never been seen before. But does housing prices hitting a level that's never been seen before actually mean they're more unaffordable than ever? Well, if you take a look at the numbers and you take a look at the stats, that's not necessarily true. Because when you look at mortgage debt servicing ratios, you can see that historically, the pink line here, which is the debt servicing ratios, which is the amount of money that is being used to pay mortgage payments, is actually lower than it typically is at other periods in history. And it is definitely significantly lower than it was in 2008, when obviously the financial crisis led to a pretty significant issue. And while all of these data points may seem like they're cause for concern, the reality is you need context. And somebody who tries to sell you gold or Bitcoin or any other type of investment telling you that this time is different or that something can only go up in value, it's a sure bet, well, that's probably a sign that you should be running for the exit. Because the thing about data, the thing about economic indices, is that when they're discussed without context, it creates a significantly different picture than what the reality may be. So what's more important than understanding that home prices are the highest they've ever been, or debt to GDP is at the highest level it's ever been, is understanding that if somebody tells you that this time is different, or that this thing is a sure bet, and it can only go up in value, that's probably the indicator that there's more to the story than just the data point that they're using to sell you on the concept. And when it comes to financial education, and particularly protecting your money, this is where it falls on you, to make sure that any investment you make, you understand. And if it's too complicated or it seems too good to be true, the best thing you can do is not make the investment, and instead invest in things that are reliable. Things like the Ray Dalio all-weather portfolio that reduces risk by simply diversifying a portfolio with bonds, with a little bit of gold, with some stocks, and with commodities. So that if one thing goes up in value and the thing that is supposed to only go up in value drops, like gold is probably going to do in the next little while, well, you're protected from any single individual investment ruining your financial circumstances. So don't take a YouTuber's word for it. Don't take a financial salesperson's word for it. The onus is on you to understand what you're investing in and understand the context behind the data. And if you want to know more about how to do that, make sure you check out this video right here.